maybe we'll just
Okay.
checking with
Yeah,
Jose. We have 5 minutes, so I think we'll probably join at 3:30.
Yeah, fair enough. So, admin, can you make Shiva Kanwar one of the panelists? Shiva, you will be able to manage this session, right? Then I will look into the next one. Shiva Kanwar. Okay. Shiva, can you manage the session? I can't hear you, but if it is good, you can put it in chat.
में चेक कर रहे थे यहाँ से डिसेबल तो नहीं है आपका नहीं है उसमें थोड़ा प्रॉब्लम है पहले भी हुआ था मैंने करेक्ट करना भूल गया मैं सही
Am I audible, sir?
yes, definitely. What about me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, good.
I think Josefa is joining.
Okay.
We'll wait for
we'll wait.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
Then so I just want to, I mean, since we are almost everybody is here, just want to set some ground rules. So we'll start with introduction and just a quick brief about the discussion, which will be 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a panel session where everybody will come and speak for 5 to 7 minutes on their opening remarks. And then we'll have a Q&A based on your opening remarks, 2 rounds of Q&A, and then, we'll go to the audience as well if they have any questions. So we'll sort of use that process. Yeah.
Azim, I think you can manage this room. I'll go to the other room and check, right?
Yeah. I think post just getting the panelist up from attendees is the only help I'll need. Rest, I think, is quite sorted for us. And we request Prachi and Professor Damodaran to keep their videos on during the session. So when the session starts, of course.
Okay.
So, Kazim, we have 3 panelists today.
Yeah, we have 3 panels.
So,
You, Professor Damodaran, and we have Josefa joining in from Nishit Desai also. He just called us, he's joining in.
Yeah. 3, 4, 5.
We're just giving him the password. So I request the admin to kindly bring Josefa as a panelist. Yeah, I think Josefa is joining us. Hi, Josefa, can you see us? Can you switch on your
Yeah, I'm
video?
just switching on my video. I can see you guys. Hi, Mr. Damodaran. Hi, Prachi.
Hello, how are you, Sefa?
Excellent. How are you?
Good, good, good.
Give me a moment.
See who, like at least I can't see
Yeah,
who is.
I'm just
Yeah, it
switching
is
on the
joining.
this. Yeah, just
Please allow your camera to view. You have to give consent. Okay. So, Josefa, I think we'll start. I think we'll kickstart the session, Professor Damodaran and
Yeah,
Prachi, because I think we'll have to try to end it by on time. And I think I'm sure Josefa will figure out a way to join in.
is he able to hear us? So
I
he was audible.
Yeah, I think now he's. Can the Yeah, I think we'll start. We'll start. So, okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session on policy roadmap for the development of Metaverse and Web 3.0. My name is Kazim Rizvi. I am the founder of the Dialogue, and I'm your moderator for today. This session is being co-organized by the Dialogue and ICRIA, and we have an exciting bunch of panelists, a distinguished bunch of panelists who will be talking to us about the Web 3.0 upcoming technologies, how Metaverse is going to revolutionize the internet, and what are the regulatory challenges and solutions as we move ahead. Very quickly, I want to welcome and introduce our panelists, starting with Professor Damodran, who is a distinguished professor at ICRIA and professor at IIM Bangalore. His research interests include the application of new generation digital technologies, the architecture of distributed economic systems, blockchain applications for defense, IoT for the food industry, climate and biodiversity financing models based on digital platforms. Professor Damodaran, it's an absolute honor to host you today, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Kasim. Thanks a lot
Thank you, sir.
for that introduction.
We're also joined with Prachi Bhatia, who is a public policy manager at Meta India, and she has previously worked with global firms such as Deloitte, PwC, and EY. Prachi, it's an absolute pleasure to host you and look forward to listening from you on Metaverse and Web 3.0.
Thanks, cousin.
And we also have with us Josefa Tawawala. I think, Josefa, we can see you finally. So it's great to finally see you and the beautiful greenery which is at the background, which looks really beautiful. I think it looks great. Probably the best background award goes to you definitely at the India ITF by far. And Josefa, apart from having great backgrounds on video calls, also heads the disruptive technologies practice at Nishit Desai and Associates, and he has worked on various matters relating to drones, RPAs, AI, driverless cars, AR, VR, and was a member of the task force set up by the government to lay down the legislative drone roadmap. So Josefa's bio is very clear. He is only interested in emerging tech, and definitely look forward to hearing from you, Josefa, on Metaverse and Web 3.0. Thank you so much for joining in today. So very quickly, I just want to sort of give a very brief background of what we're trying to do here. I know 50 minutes is not a long time, and I think we need 50 days maybe to discuss this topic because this is probably the future of the internet, which we are talking about right now. Definitely, probably the most important when it comes to the role of technologies and what lies ahead in the future and how regulations have to catch up and policies have to be developed to maximize the potential of emerging tech, but at the same time, limit its negative influence it may have on the society and people as a whole. So, very quickly, right, when the internet started in the early 90s, we looked at Web 1.0, which was a very basic version, read only version of the internet. And slowly in the late 90s, people started communicating with each other. We had the email service invented. We had the advent of social media in the early 2000s. And there we started looking at the evolution of the internet from a read only, very basic version to a version which was connecting people, a version which was facilitating jobs, growth of economy, fueling growth through digital mediums, giving rise to new tech economies, giving rise to new companies, new ways of doing business, etc., which was Web 2.0. Web 2.0 was interactive. We are still living in that era where we are living in a very hyper connected world with the pace of technology moving forward with faster internet speed, greater internet penetration. More and more people are now interacting with each other for commercial purposes, for personal purposes, for various purposes. I mean, we are doing this webinar in a form of a Web 2.0, really, right? And that's where we are right now in the 21st century, where we are maximizing the potential of the internet in a 2D format. But what happens when this moves into a 3D format? What happens when this becomes more immersive? What happens when I have a device on my face and I can see Professor Damodaran with me here, Josefa sitting there, and Prachi sitting right there, and I can literally feel that I'm in an immersive island with them and having a conversation. That is what we will be talking about, and that is what is going to be in the Web 3.2 internet with the rise of the metaverse. We are going to be entering a form of internet which is going to be a lot more personal, a lot more immersive, and a lot more relatable. And it's going to transform learning, interactions. It's going to transform jobs, commerce, telemedicine, you name it. Everything which we do on the internet right now is through a 2D medium. I'm sitting in front of a computer screen, but what if everything around me is in the form of digital avatars, as they call it, and digital personalities, which can then talk to you as if you are there with them in a real world. And maybe when the reality is also intersectioning with the digital aspects, what happens in an augmented reality format. So that's what we will be talking about today. I'm quite excited to listen to the panelists. So we will have probably 5 to 6 minutes. I invite all our panelists to sort of come in and give a sort of an opening remark. Then we'll come back and I'll have a few questions to ask them, a few specific questions, and then we'll sort of take another round and maybe also go to the audience later on. So thank you all once again for joining in. Thank you all for being patient with us. And I'd like to start with Professor Damodaran, sir, with you first. And your profile speaks for itself, and your work in the work of emerging technologies is extremely exemplary. Um, I have a question for you, and I would like you to come in and talk about the scope and the role of Metaverse in 3.0. Uh, where do you see what is your vision? Where do you see this heading? So over to you, sir.
I think, Kasim, you have given a very good introduction to Web3 and Metaverse. And I will take off from where you left. See, I am an economist, and at one point, I have been also handling intellectual property rights for quite some time. So I'll put these two angles in whatever I'm saying about Metaverse. As you said, Metaverse is a different experience. I think it's very immersive, very different from what we have been used to. It is basically the other universe to which every one of us would like to migrate, right? So I have a very basic, maybe a very pedestrian point. We have we, Everyone in this world has been a dreamer at some point in time. We all dream a lot of things, but we don't realize most of it in the real world. So metaverse gives us chance to, if I am an artist and I find my digital art doesn't get mentioned anywhere, I put it in Facebook, it doesn't get recognition. But here in metaverse, I create my own art, and who knows, somebody will be picking it up. And as you said, Web3 is very different. I'm not just putting up content and waiting for somebody to protect that content. I have to do it myself, or I have to give it to somebody who is very trusted. So Web3, the whole point is, as most of you know, we are responsible for our own creations, right? And we are the custodians of our own creations. So that means the onus of protecting our intellectual property rights is squarely belonging to us, unless we go for some other arrangement. So this is the Web3 part of it. And now Metaverse, as Kasim mentioned, it's a different universe altogether. You are functioning through your avatar, and this avatar is mostly your creation. But in practice, now this is an important point I would like to highlight. Most of these avatars are your creation, but it is driven by, artificial intelligence. So metaverse in the years to come will see a lot of play of artificial intelligence, and which is intermediated by our own interventions. So it is very complex to determine what is your intellectual property right in metaverse, because AR, and I think I'm very sure Hussefa would have a point on this. Uh, the moment you get an AI creation, how do you define intellectual property rights on it? Because you are an agency which is very abstracted. It's not human. So that is a problem, one of the biggest challenges that one will have to face in metaverse, and especially the metaverse where creativity is considered to be very important. Now, this is the first point. The second interesting point is, here I am coming in as an economist, is that traditionally in economics we learned that land, labor, and capital is the whole point about factors of production. We put it together and create products. Now, here everything is created by labor, the so-called labor, because land is created in the digital space. Obviously, God has not given it to us. Here we have to create our own land. We have to create our own platform. So and then capital certainly comes from labor. Even in the real world, that's a situation, right? So I would imagine that labor is the labor or human resource and human ingenuity, and in some cases, artificial intelligence is the whole creator of that new universe that we are talking about. Here, at least, you had some bounties of nature which you could play around. So, this, I think, is going to raise a lot of issues in economic theory. Conventional economic theory would stand on its head if you go by that. The third point is that this is about the three approaches to metaverse. Metaverse means different things to different people. And, the first, at least three or four strands you can see. The first strand is, this is associated with meta mostly, is about social interaction and the role of social interaction and the intensity of experiences in that space. And the second is what is associated typically with Web3 is a creator's economy, right? And the third interpretation is there is an industrial, just like there is an industrial IoT, you have an industrial metaverse. Each one has a different function, and each one requires a different set of regulations to handle it. So, having said these three things, the play of artificial intelligence, especially which is reflected in virtual reality as well as augmented reality, is that it will be very important to identify the link between you and your avatar. Assuming that is a human agency which has created the avatar, which is without the least, with the least intermediation of artificial intelligence. What's the linkage between the two? If the avatar goes and does something very bad in the metaverse, who is accountable for it? Now that means you have to bring an external agent into the system, which means again the state gets into the picture. And that means, like the blockchain revolution, you will have a new set of people. Blockchains are meant to be public, open resources. They got to be permissive, then you develop various kinds of things. So that is another big issue in the metaverse. Now, having flagged the issues, I would also say what are the prospects, remarkable prospects. Because if you are poor in the real world, you could be very rich in the metaverse, right? You have an aspiration. There is no social institution preventing you from growing. And then the other thing is you could operate in that parallel world and also have interactions with the real world, because the resources have to flow, financial resources have to flow from the real world to the metaverse and vice versa. But I'm afraid that when it comes to NFTs and other things, which are very central to Web3, Web3 actually more than the creator economy depends entirely on NFT. But that NFT that you find in metaverse is much more pervasive. It is not just on unique resources. Any resource that you create in the metaverse is unique. So everything is covered by NFT. So you won't have the NFT of the real world and or the world in which we live and which we are experiencing now through NFT sales and all that. Would not be fungible with the NFT of the metaverse. Now these have raised very fundamental implications on whether the metaverse has to be regulated or it should be distributed, which is the spirit of the blockchains. Everything should be ideally distributed. Distributed community runs it. These are the larger issues that one gets to see in the metaverse. So at this point, I will stop, and I don't want to prolong this.
No, no, I'll come back to you. I think very important observations. One is, of course, on how the traditional economic theories would play out. I mean, you spoke about land, labor, capital, and how it works in the metaverse. I think also the point on NFTs, transactions, and also just generally transactions and also interaction with between people. I'll come to Prachi, and this is something which has also been I've been thinking a lot about. I mean, when I come to Josefa, we can discuss a little bit more on how will rights play out in the metaverse. How
Uh,
how
Kasim, can I make a small point? I think I
please.
made a small error when I said NFTs are not fungible. I should say NFTs are not exchangeable.
Right,
Fungible is a more loaded term. So
right.
because NFTs are all about non-fungibility, so it's exchangeable.
Absolutely. And I think the legal theories, the economic theory, various, I mean, all the theories of systems which we have been developed over centuries. How will those play out in the metaverse? Will we have to reinvent it, or will we see it as an extension of the real world? I think that's something maybe, Prachi, you can also come in. Would love to get your perspective. But generally, where do you see it in terms of the growth? Because metaverse is not just about, evolution, but it's also about the formation of the new internet. So how are we building that new internet? Would love to get your perspective.
Thanks, Kazim, and thanks to Ikrier and Dialogue for giving me the opportunity to be here with all my fellow panelists. So I think, as Professor Damodran rightly said, you explained the concept of metaverse beautifully, and Professor Damodaran, your economic theory and the other aspects that you brought around the Web3 technologies. I think picking a segue from there, I would like to first talk about the 3D version of internet, and like Kazim, you said, it's going to create real world experiences, because when we are talking about an immersive experience, the kind of content that we will see, it will have an ephemeral nature rather than having a static nature. So a lot of rules around that, regulations around that will have to evolve accordingly, and the generic rules of operations that apply in the physical world may be more relevant when we are talking about an immersive experience. And also thinking about how we think when we are moving in a closed space, while when we are in an open space, I think that's another area to look at. For example, when we are out in a public space, which is a restaurant, it's usually more controlled. There are certain instructions, rules that users have to follow, whereas if you're in your own space, if you're in a friend's house, the rules are much more relaxed. You can
Yeah.
decide how you want to update. So that, I think that's one of the critical things. And when we are talking about these technologies, definitely it has a lot of potential in various sectors, ranging from education, skilling, healthcare. And we've already seen how digital technology has transformed various sectors. And we are right now in the beginning of this journey, and it'll with the metaverse coming in, all of these benefits will definitely continue to grow. And to reap the benefits of these technologies, the things like privacy, security, and safety will have to be engineered and designed in the inception of creating these technologies. So I think it's a quite an interesting area, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. And I just like to add one more point to what Mr. Damodaran said, that this is about like starting with Meta, but I think Metaverse is something which all the companies are building. So there will be many businesses, creators, developers, and companies who are going to build the next generation of the internet. So I'll take a pause here, and back to you, Kazim. Really look forward to this discussion.
Yeah, so Prachi, very interesting point. You mentioned that many companies in many industries are building, and I think we are seeing, a lot of Indian startups also coming up in the space of metaverse, early stage startups. And I was reading an article somewhere that there was a wedding which happened in the metaverse. I think the first ever wedding which took place. Then I again read an article where there's a hospital which has been now going to be constructed in the metaverse. Basically, they bought some land and now they will be making a hospital. And I'm like, how do you buy land over there? Like, what is the transaction how is it taking place? What will the hospital do? Like, will my avatar walk into the hospital with uh, pretty much 99% rendering of my body, imitation of my body, and then it can do better diagnostic. So I am very keen to understand the implication on society and how it can have a positive transformation on the society, and also the negative influence which, of course, every technology will bring with it, but regulations will be there to protect us. But Joseph, I want to come to you on the regulation part later, but I want to start with you and my earlier question on the legal jurisprudence, right? Very simply, how will right to speech play out? How will right to privacy play out? How will right to move play out, right? If I want to travel, do I need a virtual passport in the metaverse with a virtual visa? How do my constitutional rights play out in the metaverse? And just sort of, I mean, these are very philosophical questions which we have to understand, and it's such a fascinating debate. So over to you.
I think it's, thank you so much, Kazim, for, inviting us, and excellent overview by Professor Damodaran, and aptly chimed in by Prachi. I think at a core construct level, right, let us first understand that metaverse is just, though it is a term, but it is a convergence of many things. So, because it is a convergence of many things, the interplay of rights and responsibility gets more and more complex. I'll give you a simple example, right? there is no standard form of definition of Web 3.0 or metaverse. When we talk about Web 3.0, a lot of people say it is, something which is going to be decentralized without any centralized ownership. And when we talk about metaverse, the common thing which comes in, it's a digital twin, with an immersive experience in the virtual world. And taking, that immersive experience of a digital twin in the virtual world, I think at a core level, many things come together. IoT, Internet of Things, come together. AR, VR comes together, which are the devices. XR technologies come together. The underlying blockchain and virtual digital assets come together for people, to trade and get rewarded. AI comes together, as Professor said. Haptics comes together. Quantum computing comes together. 5G. So it is a whole bunch of things which come together. And when it comes together, the rights, liabilities, and the legal principles get extremely complex. Now, I will probably start at a very basic explanation level, and then I will kind of use it from a risk and liability perspective, right? The more decentral you get, the first question which comes is accountability. See, there is a lot of benefits when you kind of decentralize and give the governance or the power to the user. But one question which comes, and there are a lot of news articles, reports, research papers. I've been looking at disruptive technologies for over 16 years now. Is that in today's sense, which is essentially a Web 2.0 environment, largely there is platform accountability. Whether you like the platform or you dislike the platform, that is a personal grievance or a personal affinity.
Yeah.
But there is a platform accountability. The moment we are moving to the next generation of the internet, there is an entire ethos and a pathos that we have to get decentral, which in a way kind of makes sense in some form, which doesn't make sense in some form, which also means that we are shifting a paradigm mindset from an accountability perspective. We are moving away from a platform accountability perspective to a user accountability perspective. And this is where the legal principles will get very interesting, Kazim, is that today if something goes wrong, who do you hold responsible, right? Ultimately there will be a user, and no system will be perfect, or no technology will be perfect where nothing, nothing will go wrong. Things will go wrong. And when it is very decentralized, where do you pin accountability, liability, enforceability? I think that is one of the core legal principles, which will come in as we move forward. The other interesting part about when you kind of look at it at a more holistic level, right, is the internet eventually, Web 3.0 or any of these kind of platforms which are being built will need to talk to each other. And this term has been, used across on the internet. It's interoperability.
Interoperability, yeah.
Yeah. Now, it is such a simple term and it's kind of used very loosely at times, right? It doesn't mean that interoperability doesn't exist today. Interoperability exists today, which is where you can communicate on the internet, which is where you can reach out. Today there are platforms which may be offering probably close-ended interoperabilities. You take decentralized roadblocks, they are decentralized, basis on the principles of decentralized, but they are still interoperable in some sense. But the issue is that, when you're looking at the world of the future, today our physical selves, let me take this, forum as an example. Today, though we are virtually, present through video, but we are all under this dialogue, platform, webinar, which we are undertaking. Now, later on tomorrow, this evening, Mr. Damodaran is inviting me for dinner, say at IIM, and, I go and have dinner. My physical self is going and having dinner. Now, tomorrow, just imagine where our avatars are coming. My avatar is coming to dialogue, and my avatar is going and meeting Mr. Damodaran for dinner at IIM. Can I transpond, myself from my avatar, from the dialogue forum to the system or the setup at, IIM Bangalore, and, kind of dine and meet with Mr. Damodaran. So the short point is the whole genesis of interoperability kind of gets, more and more interesting. Issues in terms of standardization will come in terms of if everybody needs to talk together. And I can probably go on for hours, but coming back to your point on IP, right? IP gets extremely critical. why IP gets critical, and Mr. Damodaran, of course, would love to chime in there, that IP is nothing but a bundle of rights. That bundle of rights is diced into something called as trademark, copyright, patent, so forth and so on. But I think at a very core level, we need to understand that some IP rights, intellectual property rights, are only territorial. I'll take trademark for an example, right? The right to a trademark and the right which I get when I register a trademark is only limited to the territory of India. If I need to go and get trademark protection under a particular statute, I need to go and register it in that particular jurisdiction. In a completely unified transbound world like say the metaverse, how will for example trademark protection work? Or in a simpler way, if I create a Manhattan shopping street in my metaverse platform, and I kind of have all the leading brands shops in it, whether it's Gucci, Armani, Prada, Zegna, whatever, you think you can do it? You can't do it because you don't own it. So all these things get more and more complex, but I'll take a pause, and I will add in as we roll forward. But I just wanted to throw some high level context setting points.
No, I think we have around 20 minutes. Maybe we can stretch for another 5 minutes if the host allow us. But very important point, and Professor Damodaran, do invite me for dinner as well at some point of time if you're inviting Josefa, just on a lighter note. But no, I think very important. I think accountability, absolutely important. And so what happens if and we've seen instances, somebody got harassed in the metaverse, and how do you complain, right? Whose liability is it? Is it the platform's liability? Is it the person's liability on the metaverse? Because in the real world, there's a police which you can go to and register a complaint. But how will law enforcement play out on the metaverse? Right. I think these are some of the questions. So, Professor Damodaran, very quickly, and I think I just want to spend the next 10 minutes on some of these questions. And to you, I want to ask, do we need it to regulate it? Or when is the right time to regulate it? Because there will be a lot of challenges which will be emerging. While the opportunities are great, do you foresee regulation at some point of time? Because right now it's at a very nascent stage, right? I mean, when you look at the metaverse, it's not like everybody has an AR/VR device. I remember mobile phones came to India like late 90s. I saw in 96, I saw my first ever mobile phone. I saw in one of my family members' hands. And it is 2022, 25 years it took us to reach a level where we have 800 million users, and I think of mobile phones. I may be wrong on the statistics, but it's somewhere close. So I'm sure it'll take us at least a decade or more to get to at least some level of, usage of metaverse. But do you foresee regulation, and how do you prevent, or how do you count or react to some of the issues which will happen?
Well, I am a blockchain enthusiast. I mean, I'm not an anarchist, but I'm tempted to feel that the ideal is distributed communities. This was envisaged.
I think we've lost. I think Prophet Damodar and Prachi both have paused. Or is it my
No,
laptop?
I can see. I can hear you, Khalid.
Okay. I think there's a connection issue.
Prachi,
So I'll request all our audience to please start adding in questions. I think we've got one question. Um It'll be great to keep getting more questions. I request all our attendees, those who are interested in asking questions, to just message me on the chat box, or if you have any question, you can share it with Arani, who's a host here, and we'll take it up. So, Josefa, why don't you quickly
yeah,
sort of try to, and I have a question for you.
go
And
for
I
it.
mean, it's a question basically, but the question is, what should brand owners do today to protect their brand from abuse in the current metaverse, NFT, decentral domain names? So yeah,
Yeah,
how do
so
you think brand can protect?
there have been, various, if you kind of Google, some of the leading companies are already kind of applying and undertaking brand protections in the metaverse. In other words,
Yeah,
I think we have Professor
yeah.
back too.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
can
sir.
I start? I think we lost some time. Prachi is
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
but
Maybe
but anyway, I will start. She must be listening to what's happening.
You can go ahead.
If you ask me about regulations, no one felt that Bitcoin would be this Bitcoin's world of public blockchains would be regulated, but it became regulated, right? Because all said and done, one of the contradictions is this intense desire to be free from controls goes against the ultimate reality that controls become essential. And I don't know whether I lost it.
No, we can see you, sir. You're
Yeah. So
visible.
the control is lost, and the control is lost because Thomas Hobbes would say, said this in the 17th century, right? Or maybe 16th century. He said Leviathan is impossible because otherwise it's state of nature. So I would say that blockchain is like a dream for state of nature. Metaverse is another dream for the state of nature, which will never work because nobody has anything called an auto regulation system. And as Husefa mentioned very correctly, the real problem is distributed communities are a dream more than they don't get realized because there are not too many people willing to do charity work, watching and verifying where things go wrong and taking action against it. So I would imagine that the problem with metaverse is that it's a shock of a technology. So a lot of it will take time to sink in, and and as it sinks in, it's not even like the blockchain, the original blockchain revolution of 2008. It is something which will meet with resistance right from the beginning. That is the problem. So we will have a quicker transition to regulations in the metaverse, quicker than even that you can think. So the next 10 years, the first 5 years may be going in a very amorphous way, nothing will happen. And after that, people will say, yes, that's a good idea. So let us have some regulations and run it,
Right.
right? And I think Web3 is too very ambitious, but it is a very great ideal. If Web3 happens, creativity will flourish. But the other side is what you mentioned, the problems of anarchism and, violence, and you don't know how to deal with it. You need your own sui generis IPR systems. And that's the point with Josefa mentioned. You need to have your own copyright. The copyrights in the real world may not apply to, digital creations. And so these are the big problems. So I foresee, to answer your question, regulations might not have come to the blockchain space, the Bitcoin blockchain space, but it may come in metaverse much earlier.
Right.
And I think another important point I would like to highlight is industrial metaverse, which I mentioned, and in a different way, I think Josefa mentioned, um, about digital twins. Now, digital twins is very important because it serves as a good model, and this is something which Prachi also was, adverting to. It is a good lesson for how to do things better. So I can see I'm now talking to you, and if I had rehearsed myself in the metaverse, I would have talked much better, right? And we would not have had those outages that would have happened if we had a metaverse to practice before we started. So I think digital twins is going to be a very big thing in industrial IoT as well as industrial metaverse. Industrial metaverse, I cannot see it happening without regulations. It will happen with regulations because then it gains mainstream acceptance. So, which compartment we are looking at, you will find that there is scope for regulations. Industrial is going to start almost from day one with regulations. And as far as the regular metaverse is concerned, the social networking sites, sooner or later, in the first 6 years, we can see some kind of a consensus on interoperability. And you raised this issue uh, about passports. You need a passport to move from one universe to another metaverse universe. Yes, those are issues again regarding regulations. So interoperability will also go with regulations. So first 5 or 6 years, we will have a regime in place. And if that comes, then this will gain a lot of currency. Otherwise, mainstream acceptance will take time. That's all that I have to say.
I
And
think,
Kazim, before
yeah,
you kind of just one point, right? Just to kind of supplement,
I just want to come go to Prachi, Josefa, if I may.
yeah, go for it.
I think she had also an internet connection, maybe issue had happened. I just want to sort of harp on this point of trust and how important it is to build trust with technology. And as we are looking at the growth of new technologies, and as and with that also comes the fact that user trust is going to be even more important. How can companies build that trust? Prachi, I want to come to you and understand, and we've discussed safety issues. So if I'll come to you, but I want to follow that line. So I'll go to Prachi first. But Prachi, talk to us about safety issues are there, security issues are there. How what can be done? What is being done to sort of mitigate some of those?
Sure. Thanks, Kazim. And I think earlier you had also talked about the regulation, and Professor Damodharan beautifully explained how it's important when we are also talking about various use cases. So just a thought there, maybe focusing on technology agnostic approach of regulation with more principles built into it might be one way to look at, because when we are talking about metaverse, it has various use cases ranging from enterprise education to social. So that could be one lens to look at it. And Kazim, coming back to your question around safety, I think it's very critical to engineer and design safety into these experiences if we have to enable adoption. People have to feel safe when they are using these experiences. And I can quickly point out to some of the recent elements that have been introduced by us as Meta. So there is one feature called personal boundary, which is the by default 4 feet distance between two avatars to present to basically prevent collision, to prevent harm. So you can disable that, but if you are logging on to a particular experience in Horizon World, that's on by design. So that's one way of how we are building safety into the products. And another way, since this will obviously need collaboration with developers, with various other creators, because it's the experience which everyone is building. So if we are looking at a scenario where we have an app store kind of a model, it's good to have policies where you have a standard code of conduct, which is the baseline policy, and then developers are given rights to build their own regulations, their own rules for accessing the experiences. And taking this in mind, even Meta launched CCVE, which is the code of conduct for virtual experiences, to enable even developers create rules and regulations which are applicable to their experiences. So
Right.
that's again another way of enforcing safety when these technologies are built.
I think safety by design, we cannot, understate how important it is going to be in the future, because, you know, look at the impact on mental health if your avatar is harassed. And I think some of these issues will start playing out more and more as more people start joining the metaverse and start crowding the space, and then the new spaces are built and developed. So while there's a lot of potential, I think there's also going to be like cautiousness in terms of how these avatars will be imagined in the future, and how much control will we have as users. What if I get locked out of my avatar, right? What if I somebody impersonates my avatar, and the avatar goes and commits crime. And so there are, I mean, from a researcher's hat, it's fascinating to think about what metaverse brings to us, and we are very fortunate to be living in this era. Joseva, I want to come to you, and then I mean, we are open for questions. Please drop in your questions in the chat box, and we will take it up. Josefa, very quickly over to you, and then we'll wait for some questions to come.
Yeah, I just want to kind of say one point on the regulatory framework, right? Because this is such a unique animal, I'm saying, because it's so interesting because of his various facets. Going back to Kazim, what you raised, we cannot have one law, or you cannot have a law which will regulate, because it is too diverse. It's the internet. We are talking of decentralization. We are talking of a cross-border unified world. You cannot have one particular law. It will have to be regulated basis the existing legal framework, basis each touch point it has. So for example, if it's particularly in relation to data, then we will have to look at applicable privacy laws basis jurisdictional, and how it kind of unfolds. So I think that is one important point I want to put out there, that it is very difficult to have one broad brush law to kind of govern all of this. And data principles actually in this sort of system get extremely interesting. More and more decentralized we get, which essentially means that the possibility of data being spread across the world is more and more. And if it's like a metaverse based on a web 3.0 platform which is following a blockchain DLT based technology, means it will be diverse. Now whether it's in cryptographic form, encrypted, which also will get into the point in terms of how harmoniously would laws across jurisdictions interplay, right? And if data is there across jurisdictions, how will it be kind of enforced? Like, say, if I want the right to be forgotten, and
Yeah.
if my data is across the ledger, how will the right to be forgotten kind of be looked at? So that's, these some of these things kind of get interesting. And even purely from a IP perspective, or you mentioned the word harm. Now, it is fascinating as to how all this will unfold, because under most global statutes, if you want to penalize something or anyone for a criminal offense, Kazim, criminal offense, the basic principle is something called as mens rea, which is
Yeah.
intention.
Yeah.
I should have the intention or an abetment related intention to
Yeah.
cause you harm. Now, it is extremely difficult in a digital world where a person is operating through a particular machine and there could be an AI interface in between. And because of that, that harm is being caused to the avatar.
Yeah.
And more importantly, not only in India, the laws globally, when it talks about harm, harassment, and these sort of things, relate mostly to a natural person, which is a human being in a
Yeah.
natural manner. So how will the liability transform or transpond from a digital to a machine, or from a digital avatar to a human being, is fascinating. And last, and then over from a Q&A perspective, right? You mentioned IP. Now I'll give you two simple examples of IP. Like, if there is a AI interface which is there in between on any platform, which could be a metaverse platform, and as Professor also and Prachi mentioned, with technologies changing, the human, which is me, you, Prachi, whoever, is inputting something in the machine. Now the machine is learning smartly and putting something else out there. So there is a new creation or there is a fuse creation, and a lot of it is dependent, say, on the AI. Now, in those scenarios, who will own the IP? Is it the owner, which is the actual one who actually created that AI? Is it the one who's actually fed initial data principles to the AI, or is it the machine? Because if it is the machine, in most jurisdictions, machines that don't have legal statehood. Saudi Arabia became an example, but I don't know how far it's going to be enforced, where a robot
Yeah.
was given some
Yeah.
legal statehood. So, short point is that when you are looking at IP creation, yes, IP is going to get created. Lots of data is going to get created. Privacy principles and all that will need to be factored. But at a basic level, how will you address ownership? That itself becomes a very interesting. And lastly, on ownership, right? If I am coming onto a metaverse platform and I am co-creating data, or I'm
Yeah.
co-creating IP with the platform and multiple users, then multiple users will own the IP. Then how will IP be able to be exploited? It is impossible that it's not like everybody sitting in the same room, right? People are spread across the world. So then how do you kind of undertake right sharing? And so these are very interesting, complex issues. But it will unfold in due course, and we need to keep plugging on. Sorry, I kind of dragged it,
No,
but
no.
back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. First, we have three questions very quickly. I'll read it out, and our panelists can take it up. One is that what should brand owners do today to protect their brand from abuse in the current metaverse NFT? That's number one. Second question is data protection is going to be critical for deliberation in the metaverse. Is the present bill effective enough to tackle the concerns? Then we have question on the emergence of metaverse would also bring innovative hardware into existence, like eyepieces and other IoT appliances in the form of AR/VR devices. Do we have a regulatory architecture to tackle the concerns emerging from them? And then the final question is, how can we tackle intangible harms in the metaverse? So, four questions. I'll give only 1 minute to every speaker to address that. I know we are actually out of time. So, Professor Damodaran, we'll start with you. You can pick any question or you can answer all. You have 1 to 1.5 minutes. Over to you, sir.
I'll just focus on the trademark issue because I'm sure Josefa and Raji will answer the others. Trademark, one thing I have noticed about products being advertised by fashion industry in metaverse is that the inclination is to finer level customization of products. It could be a shoes, or it could be an apparel, it could be a jacket, it could be anything. And it is so fine tuned because in any case it's a digital wear, right? It's not a physical wear. So the differences between one product and the other is it's a very thin line of difference. So I would say that the emphasis in metaverse, I'm just speculating, could be more on product marks rather than generic marks. Because in any case, your companies are pretty low profile. They are DAOs, and DAOs don't have a great image of being multinational or anything to begin with. I mean, large scale to begin with. So there will be a proliferation of product marks to protect products from getting violated. This is my surmise, and it is born from evidence from the fashion industry. It could have extensions in other areas as well. There's one more question, about uh, one more question was there which I saw. It is on privacy. I'm sure that my fellow panelists can answer it much
Yeah,
better.
mostly on privacy, intangible harms.
Yeah, because in any case, all three of you can answer it because you have mentioned it in your presentation. But there is one more thing that is about machinery. Yes, the platforms that are being created by Meta, the equipments that are being created by NVIDIA and others, they require whether do you need any regulations on that? I don't think there need to be any regulations. It's created in the real world and then for use in metaverse. It is the capital equipment that you use to create products. So I don't think there is a need to regulate them, but the uses to which they would be put is something which needs to be regulated, not the machines or the equipments or per se. So if there is an ocular device which is being created, I don't think the problem is with the ocular device, but the use to which it may be put. So this is my view.
Right.
These are my two answers.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Damodaran. Pleasure to host you. Prachi, over to you. And there's one more question. What does metaverse mean for the future of customer experience? So, privacy, customer experience, tangible harms, how do we tackle them? And yeah, I mean, the new hardware which is coming up, how do you protect users from the threats?
So I think I can start with the tangible harms question, and I also mentioned that in one of the questions that you had asked me, Kazim. I think engineering for safety, privacy issues while designing the products is definitely one of the key ways of addressing harms. And like Professor Damodaran already mentioned, technology should be like technology laws cannot be future proofed. Laws have to be technology agnostic. So linking the laws to usage would be one of the ways, and thinking about how can we introduce self regulation when we are talking about innovative technologies. And when we think about future of customer experiences, I think a lot is already in evolution, in development. But some of the early examples that we are seeing is that how can training be improved in metaverse? How can workers get more chances of experimenting with welding experiments? How can actually you create an immersive learning experience for students, bring various subjects to life? Those are some of the real world examples that are already there. And even brands, how AR technology is being used to showcase products on various digital platforms is one of the way that experiences are already evolving, and there will be more such examples, but more will come in the next future.
Thank you, Prachi. It's been a pleasure to host you. Thank you so much for joining us. And Josefa, final points. You can address the questions, intangible harms, privacy, future of customer
Yeah.
experience, and just, hardware. How do we sort of tackle
Yeah.
those?
So I think, see, on the DPP bill, Shruti, it's just come in, right? It's still in bill form 2022. There are some around 18 places where things will get notified by the government at in a bill level. But if you ask me at a core concept level, it is looking at protecting information of natural person. It is regulating processing. There is some sort of transparency at a concept level which is being built in. So I think the core fundamentals have actually been set. Implementation, only time will tell how good, how bad it's going to be. And this law is looking at more at a cause effect also, if you look at the penalties and how they've kind of framed it. So yes, broadly at a core construct level, if implemented properly, things should get addressed. But if I flip it and, if this becomes decentralized, then questions become very different, right? Who's the one who's actually authorizing the processing? Who's the fiduciary? Who's the processor? So those sort of things, it's not because of the law, but it is because of the very technology. That is on the bill. Second, in relation to intangible harms, right? Now, this is uh, the laws somehow will never be able to keep up with technology, because you need to understand that in today's internet world, when the previous disruption took 10 years, in today's times we are having disruption in 2 to 3 years. Like the Indian Penal Code is a 160-year plus legislation. It was introduced in 1860. And the IT Act, though it's been over 20 years, itself is kind of being redrafted under the Digital India Act. So there have been steps taken at a regulatory government perspective, but technology will keep evolving, and I don't think we will always be at a platform where they both are together, and they should not be together, because if they are together, there is quite a high likelihood that law will empower or stifle the growth of technology. So in a way, that if it's playing catch up, it's good, because these areas are at a broader level developing. And last point on NFTs and protection IP. I think at a very core level, whoever is looking at exploiting anything in the digital world, including the metaverse, needs to first understand where does the scientist lie, or what is the IP. So, for example, if I have a painting and I own, I don't have it, but I'm just saying, if I own MF Hussein's painting, and if I want to create a digital NFT out of that, or somebody else comes to my house, takes a picture of that and wants to create a digital NFT of that, now that itself would be infringement, because you don't own the underlying IP, so you can't further go and exploit some things which you don't own. So I think at a very core level, all these are fancy terms, but at a elementary aspect, you should have ownership of the intangible or the tangible in which you want to exploit the intangible, and then you can slice it, dice it in whatever form. So I think these were my three quick comments on the questions raised.
You all. I think we are a little beyond time. So thank you so much, Professor Damodaran, Prachi, and Josefa for joining in. Hopefully, the next session could be in the metaverse. I don't know if that will be possible. But maybe sometime in our lifetimes, such discussions. I mean, I didn't imagine, and I'm not that old, but I didn't imagine 20 years ago that, we would be able to facilitate each other through video calls. So what lies ahead in the next 20 years? I think one point which we couldn't discuss was accessibility of the devices itself and user friendliness, because at the core of all of this lies that it has to be easy to use. And with the smartphone revolutionizing everything in the 21st century, and the laptop doing that for in the the late 20th century, can the new AR VR devices do that for the late 21st century? I don't know. I don't have the answers. I'm not a technologist. I'm just a researcher. But let's keep asking the right questions and make sure that we have something where people feel protected and people can trust the environment. I think trust, again, I cannot emphasize it, that how important it is going to be for people to then, sort of go and migrate to a new form of technology. So privacy by design, safety by design, and something which we called, when it comes to AI, diversity by design is going to be critical to make this successful. But thank you all for joining in today. And we look forward to meeting you all soon. If not in real life, then maybe in the metaverse. So have a good evening, everybody, and have a great weekend. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, Kazim. Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks.